Hello and welcome to this presentation from Pluralsight. My name is Andrew Mallet and I'm here as your instructor, and we're going to take a look now at troubleshooting DNS, so taking a look at DNS problems and analyse them through the log files. So when you're ready and sitting comfortably, we shall begin. As we look through this section, we're going to look at different types of resource records and how and why they are used. We're going to be looking at enabling DNS logging, so seeing that we can log through the syslog daemon and directly through the name daemon. We're looking at what happens when we make changes through to zones and how we can clear our DNS cache, or perhaps we want to reload zone configuration but want to leave any of our cache records in place. We'll also see how permissions can affect things. And those permissions can be done through our ordinary mode or access control lists, so discretionary access control lists, but also looking at our mandatory access control systems such as AppArmor and SE Linux. So let's begin by looking at resource records, and the first resource record that we're going to take a look at is a canonical name or CNAME record. These are a type of alias, so if we take a look at the record here, we've got a record then for NS1. We're using then internet records, and then the canonical name where it's really pointing to is master.example.com. So the alias NS1 is on the left-hand side, so it's our resource record name, but we should never use these aliases within the right-hand side, the value field. So be it in here, obviously we're defining our alias, but we shouldn't use the alias ns1.example.com. anywhere else. So we're just making it easy for us to be able to access a resource here, but the alias should never appear in the value of a record. Now the CNAME record is just one type of alias. Another alias that we might use is when we're working with multi-homed hosts, or hosts that have more than one network card or more than one IP address assigned. So here then we've got a server web. We can see we're creating two address records for web. We've got the address record 10.0.2.10 and the address record 10.0.3.10. So yes, it's on two different networks. Working with just these values, if we're on the 10.0.2 network, as a client, we're going to be assigned that when we access the hostname web. If we're on the 10.0.3 network, and I'm assuming here this is a 24-bit network, then we're going to be assigned then the value of 10.0.3.10 for the host web when we access it. If we're not on either of these networks, it will work as a round robin, where we're assigned in order web on the 2, web on the 3 network to try and give some very simple load balancing. We also then might create administrative aliases, so we're still using address records, but we never really tell people about web 2 and web 3. We keep these just for administrative purposes, so when we access the host web2.example.com, we know then that we're going to the address 10.0.2.10, etc. We might also create TXT resource records. And these resource records, again, when we start looking at these two hosts, web 2 and web 3, we might then have these resource records that then specify for web 2 that it's on the network Office 1, let's say. For web 2, we might say the network is the backbone network. This is just a text string, so network has no specific meaning other than the way we want to interpret it. And these strings can be up to 256 characters in size. So we can put any text that we like, but it then just becomes a note or a description, if you like, behind it. So we could retrieve then these text records or TXT records, and they will let us know the purpose of that interface. Of course, so long as they've been populated. Now, when we've been looking at Web 2 and Web 3, we were omitting the trailing dot. And what that means, if we just have Web 2 or Web 3, then we're going to append the value of $origin at the end. But where we are setting then fully qualified hosts, such as in our CNAME records, we want to make sure that we put the trailing dot. If we look at this example here, where we've got $origin, example.com dot, and then we've got our NS, and with that, we want to append example.com dot. But then the canonical name that we're pointing to is master.example.com. Now that at first might look perfectly okay, but without the trailing dot, we're going to append the value of $origin. So that's going to resolve to master.example.com.example.com. So it's not going to be giving the desired result. So it's a very easy mistake to make, and something that we need to be very officious on when we're creating and editing these files. Something we've already talked about, both in these slides and in previous slides, is the @ notation. So where we use the @ symbol, we can use then it as a replacement to the value of $origin. So for example, where our origin is example.com dot, we can then have our start of authority record being in start of authority. So it becomes a shortcut way. Whether or not these shortcut ways are good or bad, but they are commonly used, and we're going to see them all of the time, especially when we look at some of the default databases that have been created. But as long as we can read this shorthand notation, we're not required to write in the shorthand notation. But it doesn't stop at the @ symbol either. We could also use a space or a tab at the beginning of a resource record, so the first column. So again, if we've got something like this, and then the rest of the start of authority record, so we've already seen the use of the @ symbol, but then for the name server record, which is often going to be following the start of authority, we could start it then space in ns master.example.com. So we're saying then for the domain.example.com dot, we're going to look for the name servers, which servers look after the database, as being master.example.com. So it's quite simple really, but we can see how this can become confusing if we don't understand the shorthand. So if a column starts with a space or a tab, then we mean we're repeating the last record used. And often that is going to be the @ symbol, which is then coming from our $origin. Now I think that's enough talking, and now's time to go through and take a look at this on our system.